do, though, begin this morning in Washington, and a hopeful sign that there could be some progress in that debt ceiling standoff.
President Biden will meet with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy at the White House for negotiations aimed at averting a potentially crippling default. The president arrived in Washington last night after a shortened trip overseas to the G7 summit in Japan. But just 10 days to go before that June 1st deadline, when the U.S. may not be able to pay its bills, every day is critical now. Even before arriving home, the president spoke with McCarthy on the phone while flying back on Air Force One. The House Speaker called that conversation productive. That is a significant change in tone from earlier this week when the president called out Republicans for pausing talks.
Now it's time for the other side to move from their extreme positions, because much of what they've already proposed is simply, quite frankly, unacceptable. It's time for Republicans to accept that there is no bipartisan deal to be made solely on their partisan terms.
NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joins us now. Kelly, good morning to you. So today's meeting is a good sign, but both sides are still pretty far apart. So give us a sense of where talks currently stand and how far they have to go to reach a deal.
Good morning, Joe. This is a chance to sort of reboot talks with the principals in the room together, with the president back from his Asia trip. And what is critical now is the limited time left. Pressure in Washington sometimes creates a movement where there hadn't been some. It was a rough weekend with negotiators, the two teams that have been working on a lot of the details. And so today the president will get back to that face-to-face with McCarthy. That'll happen sometime this afternoon. Imagine his body clock is still a bit off from just traveling back from Asia. While the president was there and taking questions from reporters, he described some of what's at stake here.
It would be a very serious circumstance if we didn't pay our debt for the first time in 230 years. That'd be a serious problem. Looking at the 14th Amendment as to whether or not we have the authority, I think we have the authority. The question is, could it be done and invoked in time that it would not be appealed and, as a consequence, past the date in question and still default on the debt?
So there the president's referring to a clause in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that says that the government must pay its bills. And is that a way to bypass the kind of partisan gridlock that's going on now? You heard the president say he thinks there's potentially a legal pathway there, but not in the time allowed, just that little over a week until the deadline as described by the Treasury Secretary. Joe?
Hey, let's talk about the Treasury Secretary, Kelly. For weeks we've been reporting she warned that June 1st is the deadline where the U.S. will have to make some tough choices about which bills it will pay, which ones it won't pay. Is she sticking to that date?
At this point, yes, but we are expecting another assessment. And part of what happens here, this isn't a fixed date on the calendar. It's a formula that she and her team work on based on how much revenue is coming into the government through tax payments and so forth, and looking at the set of bills and obligations that the government must pay. And when she does that math, she's saying on or about June 1st, the ability to pay all of the U.S. obligations, and that is, of course, repaying debt. It's meeting the obligations to veterans and seniors and so forth. She believes that's when things will become critical. So it is not a fixed date on the calendar, but one that she's got a lot of data to tell her that's when it's a crisis point. Here's what the secretary said on Meet the Press.
Well, I indicated in my last letter to Congress that we expect to be unable to pay all of our bills in early June, and possibly as soon as June 1st. But I certainly haven't changed my assessment. So I think that that's a hard deadline.
And the secretary says she expects a lot of money coming in around June 15th, but that may be too late to avert default. Joe?
All right, Kelly, and of course, stand by. We're keeping you busy this morning. We're going to bring you in for our next story as well. Stephen?
And speaking of that next story, Joe, in Ukraine this morning, Russia is claiming victory in the war-torn city of Bakhmut. Russian state media reports President Putin there congratulated Russian troops on their victory. State TV also broadcast pictures of soldiers celebrating, which NBC News has not been able to independently verify. A top Ukrainian commander visiting the city's front line acknowledged his troops only retained a, quote, insignificant part of the city. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy denied that Russia controlled the city, but compared the situation there to the horror Hiroshima faced during a meeting with the G7 leaders in Japan.
But you have to understand that there is nothing. They destroyed everything. There are no buildings. It's a pity, it's tragedy, but for today, Bakhmut is only in our hearts. There is nothing on this place.
Oh, for more on this, we want to bring it back in NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. And she's joined by senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis. Thank you both for sticking with us for this. And Kelly, let's start with you. What is the White House saying about this victory that Russia's claiming?
Well, there's great concern, of course, when they're looking at the lay of this theater of war. And Bakhmut is not fully in Russian control, according to the Ukrainians. The U.S. can't independently determine that. But you got a sense from President Zelensky's tone there, his concern, and certainly the White House shares that. At the same time, there were big developments at the G7 with President Zelensky meeting in person with President Biden and other leaders, and movement on things like supplying and training the pilots of the Ukrainian military for F-16s that can be provided by U.S. partners, with the U.S. doing training, and the critical need that may be for the next phases coming in this war. There's a lot of concern about the timing right now, how best to supply Ukraine. Clearly, the president feels that the unity of the G7 is strong, and that was certainly enhanced by President Zelensky being able to be there in person and to make his case. But the development in Bakhmut is certainly concerning. The Wagner Group made this announcement about claiming that, waving the flag, all of that kind of stuff that certainly gives you a sense of how brutal this battle has been for many months to try to claim that city in Ukraine. Stephen?
So, Lieutenant Colonel Davis, strategically, how important is Bakhmut to Ukraine, and what type of response do you expect to see from this?
You know, the real issue with Bakhmut is not so much the tactical location, because it's just one of many cities in the area of Donetsk. But the bigger issue may have been that in order to try and hold on to the city, Ukraine has for many months, really since December, I think many military experts were saying that they should have withdrawn to their next prepared level of defenses. But they decided to hold on to it. And in doing so, they have poured in many, many brigades of reinforcements to try and hold it, brigades that have now been lost and that are no longer available for their upcoming offensive. And so in that sense, the loss of Bakhmut may be much more significant to Ukraine because of the lack or the lesser offensive firepower they'll now have.
And speaking of firepower, Kelly, you mentioned earlier the F-16s. We also know the $375 million aid package from the U.S. But regarding those fighter jets, this is something Ukraine has been asking for such a long time. Do we know why the White House has sort of shifted their opinion on the international community providing these?
Well, the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, describes it as assessing different needs during the course of what has now become a very long war, 15, 16 months, and that they believe that there are different phases of that where different tools in the theater of war are more effective. The U.S. has clearly resisted that, in part because they were concerned that F-16s, these very agile fighter jets, could escalate the conflict and be used in a more offensive way against Russia, which could bring in others like NATO, like the United States, into a wider conflict. The U.S. has not wanted that to be the case. And the president says he has gotten assurances from President Zelensky that these jets and the support that the U.S. provides for them will only be used in a defensive way to guard the skies over Ukraine and not widen the battlefield or make this conflict even more dangerous than it already has been. Stephen?
So, Lieutenant Colonel Davis, just how effective do you think the F-16s can actually be for Ukraine? They've been on that wish list for such a long time now. Could this be a game changer?
You know, that honestly, we got to keep a sober understanding of what this aircraft can do. And it is certainly an improvement over anything that they have, like the MiG-29s in the Ukrainian Air Force. But it is not a game changer. The F-16s are very vulnerable to Russian, both their modern aircraft, the MiG-31s and the Su-35s, as well as the S-400 anti-aircraft systems. And they're certainly going to continue to be at risk anytime they go in the air, just like the MiG-29s have been up to this point. So I think we need to have an understanding that this is not going to be a game changer. It'll be an improvement, and certainly the Ukraine can use any improvement it can get, but we need to be clear-eyed about this.
All right. Kelly O'Donnell, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis, thank you both. To the race for president now, where the growing field of Republicans running for their party's nomination is about to get larger today.
Republican Senator Tim Scott is expected to announce that he is running. He'll make it official at an event in his hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. But Scott and others face an uphill battle against former President Trump, who is already actively campaigning. NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray joins us now with more. Mark, good morning to you. So Senator Scott and other GOP candidates, they face a tough task going up against former President Trump. So how is he positioning himself in a race that's getting more crowded and has a front runner who just takes up a lot of oxygen?
Yeah, Joe, Senator Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, was first appointed to his position by Nikki Haley, who also is running for the Republican presidential race. And he ended up decisively winning re-election just in the last midterm season. His advisors believe that he is one of the party's best communicators and messengers. They cite the fact that he hails from South Carolina, which, as you know, is one of the very early primary battlegrounds in the race for the Republican nomination. He has a lot of resources. He has more than about $22 million cash on hand after his Senate re-election from 2022, which he can use in his presidential account. And then they just ended up citing all the unpredictability in this race. And if you recall, at this stage back in the 2016 cycle, before Donald Trump ended up getting into the race, there was the thought that Jeb Bush or someone like Scott Walker, then the Wisconsin governor, were the early front runners. And of course, that ended up changing. So we have a long ways to go. And Senator Scott's team believe they can actually stack up against Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis.
So, Mark, one issue that Scott could be facing is the name recognition issue. You mentioned Nikki Haley. Of course, she was part of the Trump administration, also a fellow South Carolinian. How can Scott sort of tackle that issue?
Yeah, that's where the money comes in, Stephen. The $22 million that I ended up mentioning earlier, the Scott campaign is actually going to be launching a very early $6 million ad buy to introduce himself to Republican primary voters, those who actually might not be familiar with him. And also, after his announcement that we're going to end up seeing in South Carolina, you're going to see the South Carolina senator go to Iowa, go to New Hampshire, and then back to South Carolina.
Let's talk about DeSantis. You mentioned him as governor. He quickly passed laws in Florida, shaping it into a state where, as he put it, woke goes to die. Well, now the NAACP is issuing a travel advisory. They issued it over the weekend, saying the state is hostile to Black Americans. So does it actually help him in a primary campaign? And if he does get the nomination, looking at this issue, the anti-LGBTQ legislation, the abortion bill, how does he pivot to a general election campaign?
Yeah, Joe, it probably does help him. And of course, this is actually caught up in the politics. And it is in response to the legislation that DeSantis has signed into law, eliminating things like diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the state of Florida, rejecting AP courses in African-American studies. And so the NAACP has actually said that Florida is hostile towards African-Americans. But yes, this is caught up in presidential politics. And the question on whether this actually helps or hurts him in a general election, well, he's got to actually win a Republican presidential primary first. And the polls show right now that Donald Trump is the clear front runner in that race. But we have months to go.
And of course, we're waiting for him to make that official to enter the race. All right, Mark Murray. Mark, thank you so much.
And staying with the presidential politics now, Donald Trump is leading in most polls for the Republican nomination, and he's also picking up some key endorsements, including a congressman from Florida who's choosing not to back Ron DeSantis. Meet the Press moderator Chuck Todd spoke to him this weekend.
Hello there, Joe and Stephen. This week on Meet the Press, Republican Congressman from Florida, Byron Donalds, joined me to discuss his support of former President Trump over his state's governor, Ron DeSantis, in the 2024 presidential race. Take a look at what the congressman had to say about it.
To me, it's not really about Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis. It's about what America needs. And that's where I've been really since day one. I talked a little bit about foreign policy in the last block. We have a situation right now where Russia's on the move and China is on the move. We need somebody who can step in day one, look at Vladimir Putin, look at Xi Jinping and say, okay, enough. I'm back. We're going to get everything in order the way it was before.
DeSantis has that ability?
I think it's going to take him time. I think there's only one person who has that ability right now, and it's Donald Trump. And for all the naysayers who would say, oh, he's unpredictable, oh, we don't know what he's going to do, let's be very clear. When he was president of the United States, the world was in a much safer place. Nobody can say that the world is safer now than when it was when he was president.
He called January 6th a beautiful day. That is not something many people associate January 6th with. You really think that's an electable position?
Look, I think what happened on January 6th was a terrible day for the country.
You don't think it was a beautiful day?
I was on the House floor.
Yeah.
It was a terrible day for the country. But that also being said, we have a situation where we got to get the country back on track. I made a comment the other day that as bad as January 6th was, the American people aren't consuming January 6th the way the media in Washington is consuming January 6th. Our country has to get back on track.
Pretty scarring in Washington. In fairness to Washington, it was a pretty scarring day for Washington.
It was. But what's happening at our southern border right now? That's scarring for the people who live at the southern border. What's happening for middle-income families when their wages are being eroded by a massive inflation brought to us by Joe Biden? That is the stuff that the American people are concerned about right now.
You can see a lot more of that interview and a lot more of Meet the Press at meetthepress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press right here on NBC News Now every single weekday at 4 p.m.
We'll be watching. Chuck, thank you.
Let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
Yeah, meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now for a look at what's ahead. Hey, Michelle.
Good morning, guys. Great to see you. And we are tracking a few spots that will see showers, and that will kind of stay in place today, tomorrow, also Wednesday. So we're going to get stuck in some patterns. Other spots really warming up into the 80s and 90s. So let's go through it here. We're looking at radar, showing us where the rain is falling. That's where you're seeing the green, also the brighter color showing us the heavier rain. So some throughout the Pacific Northwest, the Intermountain West, portions of the central and southern plains, the Rockies as well. Then we're watching the southeast, some rain this morning. That's going to pick up as we go throughout today. This is the setup here. We have a disturbance moving through the middle of the country, at least the southern plains, Oklahoma, Texas. Could see some heavy rain. We're also looking at persistent rain along the Gulf Coast into the southeast. We could see 1 to 3 inches per hour and up to 7 inches of rain over the next several days. That's going to prompt the chance for some flash flooding there. It's going to prompt the chance for some flash flooding also in portions of the southern plains. So that pattern continues into the middle of the week. Unfortunately, we're looking at heavy rain at times. And the good news is we have a low risk for severe storms, but still could see some severe storms in the panhandle of Florida and also panhandle of Oklahoma and also Texas, where we could see winds really gusting up to 60 miles per hour. In terms of the rainfall, we're talking about a lot of rainfall over the next several days. Rainfall amounts, where you see the heaviest amounts, that's in the reds, the oranges, the yellows. So hourly rates 2 to 3 inches possible. Panama City, Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, Fort Myers, down to Miami. You will see heavy rain over the next several days. And because of that, we have a flash flood risk today. That's portions of the southeast. And then notice the southern plains as well, portions of the central plains. That will be the concern over the next several days. This is tomorrow. It's going to stay in place. That disturbance will come through over and over again through portions of the southern plains. That's why we're going to see the chance for some rain, and also that front kind of draped over the southeast. We're looking at the chance for, again, up to 7 inches in some spots. Talking about severe weather, again, the risk is lower than it has been, but still could see some stronger storms, especially where you see the yellow shading. So Amarillo, Lubbock, we're looking at portions of Texas and Oklahoma. Could see winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour and could see some large hail. The good news is the tornado threat is low, though.
All right, very good. Michelle, thanks so much.
Sure.
Good to see you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.